I'm Meredith Worthen. I am an assistant professor of sociology at the University of Oklahoma and elected faculty member of Women's and Gender Studies. My areas of research are stigma, deviance, adolescent sexuality, and LGBTQ identities. My degrees are from the University of Texas at Austin. I was there from 2001 to 2009, and I moved here in 2009. While Austin is in Texas, a red state also, Austin itself, very quite liberal area, especially when it comes to issues related to, well, LGBTQ issues. So moving here was quite an experience for me. I felt like there was a lot of visible prejudice and stigma related to the LGBTQ community, and upon arriving here, this was recently, the Matthew Shepard's Hate Crime Act was passed, and it was very exciting for me. I have followed that very closely, but then we had a senator in the Oklahoma legislature who tried to pass a bill saying that Oklahoma we weren't going to support the federal hate crimes legislative. And luckily that didn't pass. But the very fact that somebody would draft legislature based on these types of ideas was really a jolt for me, and that was really hard for me. And I think that based on those experiences, seeing that type of visible prejudice was very difficult for me. And so I decided to take that negative energy and start the Welcoming Project, which is the nonprofit that I run. And basically, it's a simple idea, allowing for businesses, churches, organizations to post visible signs indicating all are welcome. And that was kind of generating that energy, that negative energy, and kind of trying to change it into more positive energy. We've had some pretty positive feedback. We started the project in basically in April, and we have about 150 businesses, organizations, and churches. Those aren't all local because of networking. We have larger communities, but we did have a mobilization day where we had volunteers go out into the Norman community and recruit businesses, and we hit almost 200 businesses, and about, I want to say 35 signed up. So that was pretty good. And according to reports from all the volunteers, very few were directly opposed. Like 3. So that's pretty good. At least if they were opposed, they were polite about it. Only about 3 people were obviously not interested, however you might take that. So I think that's a pretty positive thing. When we first introduced the Welcoming Project, I had no idea what to expect. I was kind of prepared for a great deal of hostility, but I haven't received that, which is a good thing. And besides that, a lot of people have expressed interest, and that we're really glad that we're bringing this to them and that they're excited about it. And really it comes from a need for the young people. When they come here from other places, we're a transient population. Norman has a huge amount of college students. We're at about 30,000, and they come from all over. And if they're already out, or they're going through a coming out process, it's always nice to know where they can go, where they're going to be accepted. And when you're here for a long time, you already know the good places, the safe places. But with our population being so transient, I think it's helpful to go to places that are supportive, to where you can feel comfortable, putting your arm around your girlfriend or boyfriend, holding hands, those types of things that a lot of times the heterosexual community takes for granted. I think that we often that this is an important part of young people and coming out and having the community be supportive of who they are and who they want to be, whatever that means. And so I think in general, I think we've had a pretty positive reception. I think that when I use the word stigma, I mean kind of the negative association that people have with a group or an idea, and prejudice can be the manifestation of that particular stigma. The kind of the way that you reveal your stigma. Many people have thoughts, negative thoughts, stigmatizing thoughts about groups and behaviors and things. But the prejudice is the actual behavior that kind of shows the stigmatizing thoughts. In terms of the roots of these things, that's an excellent question. I think a lot of times we manifest stigma and then change that or reveal that as prejudice when we don't understand something or when we're fearful of something. And you can see that in the roots of a variety of stigmatized groups and prejudicial movements. And in general, when we are fearful or confused about something, instead of kind of learning about it, which some people do, they transfer that into prejudice or hate, even in some circumstances. And while we've historically seen that done for a variety of groups and behaviors and belief systems, the gay community is experiencing that to a high degree, and with the political climate being so charged with issues related to the LGBT community, we're starting to see more visible manifestations of that in our laws that we haven't always seen so visibly. But that also means that we're starting to talk about it. You know, the idea of marriage equality is relatively new. I mean, this isn't something that people talked about 50 years ago. And it's something that is part of virtually every political conversation that people have now. So I think that's a good thing. And it's bringing a lot of these issues to light. And it's bringing a lot of prejudicial comments and manifestations of stigma to light as well at the same time. From my research on what's going on with the teens today, they're growing up in a very different environment than you or me or virtually anybody. They're growing up in an environment where they're learning about gay issues, where there are gay television shows, Glee, Modern Family, wildly popular television shows that have characters who are going through exploring their sexual identity, and they relate to these characters, or at least they are seeing them, something that I certainly didn't grow up with. And I think that is a very powerful thing. You know, a lot of times people dismiss media, oh, that's just on television, but especially as a teenager battling through all kinds of things, as all teenagers do, seeing the variety of characters on television can have a huge impact. So I think today, with adolescents in general, they are more explorative than they've ever been in the past. And they're more open to diversity. And the reason I really see this, the way I usually see this, is the words that the teens use to describe themselves. So, you know, we use this acronym, LGBTQ, right? Often, I mean, there's all kinds of manifestations of that, but that's generally one that people know what it is. So, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer. But what's interesting about the teenagers today is they don't like any of those words, and they make up their own words, whatever works for them, right? So they might say, I'm a bi queer femme, I don't know what that means, but it works for them, right? They're embracing who they are. They're connecting with other teens using those terminologies. They're really developing their sexual identity in what we might call a modern, or really a postmodern world, which is totally different even from the way I grew up, where there were no out gay people in my high school. And now that's certainly not the case. And so I think as today, the construction of adolescent sexuality, whether it be straight or not straight, is dramatically enhanced by the myriad of different identities that they're exposed to. And of course, with Facebook allowing people to connect different communities, that also enhances those things as well. Like I already mentioned, stigma is something that most of us, probably all of us, stigmatize something or someone or some type of behavior or some group. It might even be something that we do as a defense mechanism, or like I already mentioned, we're fearful, we don't understand something. But stigmatizing something is certainly one step in the process. When we move towards active prejudice, vocalizing our stigma, or actually, hurting a group or partitioning a group due to our stigma, that takes it up that extra level. But what happens, I think, is if you're going to make some comment or thought or grouping based on who someone is, you're going to have to justify it. And so, unfortunately, a lot of times especially the gay stigma or gay prejudice is justified with religion. And a lot of times people look to their religion, or say that that's because it's my religion, that's why I don't agree with gay lifestyles. But I think this is a really, really unfortunate thing, because there are many religions and many churches right here in the Norman community that support LGBTQ individuals, that are they embrace them, they're in the gay pride parades, all of these things. So to rely on religion to justify your prejudice and your hate is something we've seen historically, and unfortunately we didn't learn from it, right? We've killed in the name of religion. We're prejudiced in the name of religion. We're hateful in the name of religion. And that's really unfortunate, because religion, to me, isn't supposed to be a justification for hatred. Whatever religion means to you, I don't think that that's the root of religion. And unfortunately, I think that the way that these types of things lead to demonization is because people start to justify their prejudice, and they lead themselves back to things like religion, which and then once they're using their religion to justify their prejudice, it builds and builds and builds, and they begin to partition themselves from the group that's being that is receiving the prejudice, making that group further and further dehumanized, different, evil, even wrong, punished. They should be punished. All of those things are distancing, and I think it's a basic human instinct to distance yourself from things you don't understand. And I think, unfortunately, that amplifies into this very extreme form of, as you mentioned, dehumanization and sometimes villainization, where people are very much chastised. So in my research, I have kind of come to the idea that a lot of people's prejudice and stigma related to the LGBTQ community is often associated with a prejudice directed specifically towards gay men. And there's a variety of theories why people would find or be particularly prejudiced towards gay men, as opposed to being prejudiced towards lesbians, for example. probably one of the largest reasons why people are are more prejudiced towards gay men than the other lesbians or even bisexual community is that people are very uncomfortable, or sometimes people even use the word disgusted with gay male sex. And this seems to be part of at least the initial reaction or the initial stigmatizing reaction people have towards the gay community. Another reason why people further stigmatize gay men compared to the other groups is because when we say the gay community, people often think of gay men. They don't think of anybody else except for gay men. And that's part of the way we privilege men in our society in general, but also because they've always been the faces. Like when we think of the gay community, we usually think of a gay man or somebody talking out about gay issues as a gay man. While that's certainly changing, our prejudices towards gay men, I would argue, are still more extreme than our prejudices towards lesbian women. We also see the over-sexualization of lesbian women in our society and bisexual women, especially among younger groups. But all that being said, the prejudices directed towards the trans community are very, very severe. And that is something that I think we are light years away from working towards reducing the stigma in the trans community, which is very unfortunate. But I think it's one step at a time with these kinds of things, unfortunately. So basically with the prejudices towards the gay community, oftentimes people are thinking of gay men, and the idea of gay men having sex with each other is part of why people are so prejudicial towards them. We also see with why people might be less stigmatized towards lesbian women is that women aren't this is a patriarchal society, so we don't care as much about what women are doing. But for a man to be gay, he's, relinquishing his power as this, heterosexual patriarchal power of society. Why would he do that? And that is further upsetting to people. So I think that the roots are probably different. Like, our roots of our prejudices towards gay men are different than our roots of our prejudices towards lesbian women, and towards the bisexual community, and certainly towards the trans community. I would argue that there's different roots behind each of them. They may be related and connected, but I think we know less about the roots of the stigmas towards the other groups, and we know more about the stigmas towards gay men because oftentimes that's what people are talking about. They think they're talking about everyone who's gay, but in fact they're usually talking about gay men, and so I think we know more about that stigma than we do about others, which is valuable for us to recognize that we might not understand those other stigmas as much, because if we're ever going to work through them and change our perspectives, we need to understand where they come from. So I argue that I think that with those different roots, we need to begin to understand where they come from and how to start working through them or changing people's minds about them. Because it won't work if we're trying to change your mind about how your prejudices towards gay men might be completely different than your prejudices towards lesbian women. So if we're going to try to hold up the mirror and show you what's going on, we need to understand what's behind both of them, or all of them, in order to work towards change. Whenever there is a highly politically charged issue, you have 1, 2, 15 sides of a debate. But generally, you'll have the liberal side and the conservative side, and they can break down further, but generally those are how people think. In fact, we like to think that way. We like to break down our thoughts into, I'm conservative about this and I'm liberal about this. It's easier for us. And so as far as these issues, gay rights issues come, that's an easy one to divide into conservative and liberal, right? I'm pro-gay rights, liberal. I'm anti-gay rights, conservative. Pretty simple. Of course, people can break it down further, and they do. But for the purposes of this conversation, I think that pretty much sums it up. But as far as the dialogue, it's whenever one side lists a bunch of things, it's hard for the other side not to retort or react to those sides with equal fire, right? These are really emotional issues for everyone, I think. I think that's why gay rights is such a big deal, because we feel emotionally charged about these issues. And so it's hard not to respond with emotion, especially if the first group starts off emotionally, right? So if they're emotional, then we would respond emotionally. It's kind of fight fire with fire. And that's kind of, I mean, if you think about it, that's kind of how Americans are. I mean, we are fiery teenagers. You know, we're a young country. We are a strong country. We like to stand up for what we believe in, whatever that means. And so this is kind of how we're trained. This is how we're raised. We're taught, you know, stand up for what you believe in. If you see injustice, say something. And we're taught that. Fight fire with fire. And so when we feel like someone's attacking us, we have a retaliatory reaction. But I think the problem with that is, as everyone knows, is that when you fight fire with fire, it could work sometimes. Sometimes is if one side has more firepower than the other. But in terms of this, it's not getting anywhere, right? We're falling on deaf ears, right? We think we know the other person's side, so we don't want to hear it. We think that the other side has no value, so we don't want to hear it. The other side is hurtful, so we don't want to hear it. There's a variety of reasons why we wouldn't listen. But I'm hopeful, especially as our youth grow up, that these conversations will begin to change, because they are growing up in this environment, literally. I mean, this isn't something that now they're 25 years old and they're just now hearing about because they're voting. I mean, they've grown up their entire lives as part of this dialogue. And so what I hear, especially with young people, they don't connect with these arguments, as they don't make sense to them in the way that they make sense to adults, right? Young people they might disagree about things, and they certainly have issues about gay rights that they are concerned about, but it feels different, it sounds different. And I think that there might be, I'm hopeful that as the youth grow up, that the conversation will begin to change to where we might be able to hear both sides. Think of it this way. If you were alive during the Stonewall riots and you were there, let's say, or you were right there on the forefront, you are a leader of gay rights activism. It would almost be a betrayal for you to sit down and listen to someone else talking about the other side. Not necessarily, but it might feel that way. But these kids, some of them don't even know what Stonewall is, right? But they know what gay rights are, and they know what these issues are, and so they're less, I almost want to say, they're less backlashy, they're less retaliatory, because they don't have that history where they need to fight so hard and fiery. They're saying, hey, I don't understand why this guy thinks that. Where is that coming from? Because they're the space they're coming from. They're already growing up in a space where gay rights is part of our environment. Instead of having to fight so hard to get us to hear about gay rights, they're already part of those issues. So their dialogue is different. So I'm hopeful that fire with fire dialectic might change as the youth grow up. While I think tolerance is an okay way to go, that's not the goal that I see. And this comes from, there is a homophobia scale that Dorothy Riddle created, and she has several stages of homophobia, starting from the very bottom, being I'm repulsed by gay people, to the very top, meaning I'm supportive. And she puts tolerance as an unsupportive point on the scale. And the reason she does that, I would argue, is that if we say we have to tolerate something, then that still implies that there's something wrong and that I have to get over it. I would argue that while I think tolerance is an okay place to be, and I would like for us to be there for sure, I don't see that as the end goal. I mean, I really see the end goal being support and integration. I don't understand, I don't think it should end at tolerance. In fact, I agree with the Riddle scale that tolerance is still slightly homophobic, saying, well, I guess I have to get over it, or I guess it's okay, or those types of things imply that there's still something wrong. So moving towards support and integration where, you know, yeah, I'm gay, but I'm also a brother and a father and a teacher and a pastor or whatever. All those things are much more important to get to where we are not focusing so much on tolerating someone who's gay and it being nothing that's going to cause us to think negatively about anyone. And that's really the place where I want to live, not in not in tolerance world, but in supportive world. Recently, there was a YouTube video that was posted by a young boy by the name of Jonah Mowry, and he just made this YouTube video. He was feeling very low. It's a very moving video, and he talks about how he's been repeatedly bullied because he's gay, and he's upset about it, but it also has a very uplifting message at the end because he says, you know, his life is worth living, and he's going to move forward even though he's gone through so much. And then he posted this video. That's, the story goes, at 2 o'clock in the morning earlier in December 2011, and it went viral. Crazy viral, 8 million hits. It was picked up by Perez Hilton, who has a wildly popular website. Many celebrities have come out in support of him, including Lady Gaga and Jane Lynch. And he was recently on ABC News with his parents, talking about the video and all those types of things. And on the video, on the ABC clip, he talks about how these people, they ask him explicitly, what are these people that were bullying you, how are they reacting to the video? And he said almost all of them have apologized, and they have supported me. And not only have they supported me, like the 10 million Facebook supporters of the Jonah Mowry fan page are supporting him and showing him how much they're here for him and how they understand it, or how they're going through those experiences themselves and how seeing the video is moving to them. All of that is very powerful. And for me, what I've come to understand, and I think this is true, most people are not going to change their beliefs or their stigmas or their prejudices without having a human experience. And I believe that watching this Jonah Mowry clip is a human experience that people can have that will change the way they think. And that's a very powerful thing to say, because a 4-minute clip of a young 14-year-old boy showing him his story to you, is more powerful than any book you're going to read or NPR message you're going to hear or any of those types of things. And if we're going to work towards opening up a dialogue, teaching people about people, what they're going through, what their experiences are, what your gay prejudice translates into in actuality, those things are the most powerful things. Those things that can open up someone's mind, show them what's going on, and listen to their reaction, right? So Jonah Mowry's message is one of those. We know there are many messages like this. The Matthew Shepard case, of course, operated like this as well. And then, of course, here in our community, we've had the suicides, Zach Harrington suicide, opening up these dialogues, saying these are people, they have pain, they have joy, they have love, they are friends, they are family, they are loved. And only then do I think that we can really begin to speak to the hostility. Because if you don't put a human face on it, how are you ever going to understand it? These are humans. These are human issues, human rights issues. And so I think the more we can bring a human face to those issues, the more chance we have of making a difference and showing people what's really going on. Because right now it's such a political thing. It's almost like we don't even connect to it, or not we. Some people don't connect to these issues. But having those human experiences, whether that be a real life experience, which of course is the best, or watching a clip of somebody going through something, whether that be painful or joyous, as with other clips that we can watch, like you were mentioning the young man who his moms are lesbians, and he was talking to I guess it's Illinois, I think, talking about, you know, how growing up with two moms, how fantastic he is, and he was pretty fantastic. So I think those things are wonderful, and I think as a sociologist, the power behind those human interactions, whether it be actually sitting in front of you or watching a clip of a real person talking about real issues, and just how they affect their life. Not how they affect the legislature or the economy or any of that stuff, just what they're going through and what that means. And when someone says these really negative words, how that makes them feel. Or when someone says, sorry, your moms can't get married, so your mom's doesn't get insurance. What does that make them feel like? Those types of things, I think, are the real teaching points where we can get in and behind some of these prejudices and work on from the human community.